Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Giridharadhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Giridharadhari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Giridharadhari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Purnamajnanatimirandasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nam Shreshtam Manumapi Satriputram Matrasarupam Rupam Tasya Grajamurupurim Maturim Gostavatim Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhikamadhavasam Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vancha Kalpataru Vyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Nikhila Shruti Mauli Ratnamala Dhyute Nirajita Padapankajanta Haji Mukta Kulairupasyamanam Paritastam Harinam Samsayami Anarpita Charim Chirat Karunayavatiruna Kalo Samarpaitum Unnatochvalarasa Savakti Shriyam Hari Purata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sandipita Sada Hridaye Kandhare Spurato Vasachinandana Ajanulambita Bujjo Kanakavadato Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Takshu Vishwambharo Dwijavaro Jugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataram Ladini Shakti Sarupaya Gauranga Suridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Gadadhara Namaste He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Radhe Vrindavanadishe Karunamrita Vahini Kripaya Nijapadabja Dasyanmayam Praviyatam Bhaktya Vihina Aparadha Lakshay Shibta Shakamaditarangamadye Kripa Maitvam Saranam Prapanam Vrunde Namaste Charanarvindam Vrunde Namaste Charanarvindam Srila Gurudev ki jai Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai Shri Shri Gaur Nityananda ki jai Shri Shri Gaur Gadadhar ji ki jai Shri Shri Dajja Gopala ki jai Shri Gaur Radha Madhav ki jai Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai Shri Brahma-stuti ki jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai Gaur Preman Hari Bol. So, good morning to all. Welcome to all the ones connected online as well. And we are continuing after concluding officially with the 40 prayers of Brahma-stuti with a few concluding classes. We will have 3 classes finally, just announcing now and at the end as well, because originally I announced class for today and the day after tomorrow, but also we'll have one more tomorrow since there's some content to unpack. So 2 classes is not enough. 3 classes is not enough either. Whole lifetime is not enough, but we have to do something about it. So we'll be meeting each other today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow as well, the same timing. So today we will have our first conclusion class. We will have 3 of them. where we will be seeing the remaining of the 14th chapter of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in which the Brahma-stuti, the prayers of Brahma, appear. But as usual, first let's begin with some recap of the last class that we had some days ago, where we studied the last verse, the very last verse of the 40 prayers of Brahma, the final prayer of Brahma. So I'll read the verse quickly, some few words, and then we go to today's topic. So Brahma concluded his prayer saying, O Sri Krishna, the lighter of the lotus of the Vrishni dynasty and a larger of the earth ocean, the ocean of the gods, of the ocean of Brahmins, and of the ocean of the cows. You dispel the dense darkness of your religion and oppose the demons who have appeared on this earth. O Lord, worthy of being adored by all, including the sun. As long as this universe exists, and as long as the sun shines, I offer my obeisances to you. Close the curtain there. So Brahma is concluding his eulogy again with Nam Sankirtan, an interesting point. The whole verse is basically one name after another, depicting the different qualities of Krishna. And that, in the words of our Guru Maharaj, shows how much the name stayed with Brahma, although he offended the form, the lila, the parikars, but there was not Namaparat, so the name stayed with him and a lot, as we will see, not only because of this conclusion in Nam Sankirtan, but because of Brahma's eventual appearance as Haridas, the Nam Acharya. So that shows how much the name stick to him and how much Brahma stick to the name. Because the names can be there, but you have to be there also. Where am I, as we spoke in our Japa retreat. So here in this verse also, Brahma refers to Krishna using Vrishnikul. You are the sun that nourishes the lotus of the Vrishni dynasty. And the commentators claim Vrishni here mostly refers to Nanda and his lineage. So Krishna mostly lives to nurture the Brajavasis, because he's mostly nurtured, if you will, by them. So that's the level of appropriate reciprocation. He speaks of Krishna in terms of the sun and then above the moon. And remember, we spoke sun and moon sometimes are considered the eyes of God. And so Brahma somehow is begging in his last verse at least to receive one glance from Krishna, connecting sun and moon with the eyes. So I can survive till the rest of I have a long lifetime remaining till the end of my life. So somehow I can survive in separation by receiving one glance. Also, in each one of these lines, maybe you recall, Brahma is describing also different purposes for Krishna's descent. The first line, you come to nourish your devotees, Paritranaya Sadhana. Second line, you come to establish Dharma, secondary purpose. Then, in the context of that, you deal with the miscreants and so on. So from higher from up to down, gradually he's describing all of them. And Brahma mainly connects himself with those purposes, especially the secondary purposes, especially the ones of chastising the demons. And Brahma says, I'm one of those. No, you come to establish Dharma and to chastise Adharma, but I'm engaging Udharma. Remember we spoke about that? Udharma, which means engage in Adharma, but in the name of Dharma. Cheating, hypocrisy. So please come and make my Udharma disappear. You chastise the Rakshasas, that's mentioned in the verse in the context of establishing Dharma. I'm one Rakshasa called Brahma. From Brahma Lok, that's me. I'm a Rakshasa, so please punish me. So Brahma is asking, please punish me. If you don't want to look at me or curse me, it's okay, but at least show some attention. If indifference is the worst thing for the servant. If the master is showing indifference, servant can no longer survive. So Brahma is begging for some sign of attention. Also in this verse, the very first word of the verse is Shri Krishna. So Shri here includes not only Krishna, but all of Krishna's retinue. So Brahma is becoming aware of this fact. Krishna is not alone. His associates are so crucial for him to be who he is. And I'm, before concluding my prayers, offering pranam not only to Krishna, not only to Sri, his associates. Sri represents everything about Krishna, even his ornaments. Remember his gunja berries, his peacock feather, even the arka fruit that is in Vrindavan that many people consider that is useless. You cannot offer that to Vishnu, but it's in Braj. it has some connection with Krishna. So, and I offended all those things by when I look at Krishna in the beginning, I said, all this, who is this guy with forest ornaments? This cannot be God. So I could, no, Bhushan apparat, that's maybe Alankar apparat, all the things that decorate. I offended each one of these, but somehow are associates of Krishna. Everything is personified there. So I not only offer pranam to you, Krishna, but to everything, embrace everything in connection to you over and over again. So in that way, he concludes his prayer. The very last words, namaste, which again means I put my hand in the ground at your feet. I offer myself to you. And the whole Brahma-stuti began with no mediati. So I offer namaste at the beginning, namaste at the end, and many namastes in between. If we go through so that's how we should conduct ourselves, and that means to have a life of prayer. No, the beginning is prayer, at the end is prayer, but in between there's over and over again an offering of ourselves. So anyhow, some words regarding yesterday's verse. So today and in our next 3 classes, today and the next 2, we'll see the rest of the chapter. We have like 21 verses left. I'll try to be brief. And then we will also share some few words about Brahma's ultimate attainment in Gaur Lila as Haridas Thakur. That will be in our very, very last class. So let's begin with the next verse. Today we will see verses from 41 to 49. So which will be quite a feat. Let's see. So I'll recite directly in this case in English, and regarding sharing some explanations, some commentaries, I won't specifically go to like commentator after commentator, but just I will share different ideas from different, but I may not mention each of them because for dynamics, for the sake of dynamics and to have time, because. So let's go to verse 41. Which is immediate verse after the 40 verses of prayer. Now Sukadev Goswami is taking the mic, if you will. I mean, all this was narrated by Sukadev to Parikshit. Always you have to bear in mind this like narrative and meta-narrative and meta-narrative. So the story within the story within the story. So Sukadev has been telling Parikshit which were Brahma's prayers. And now Sukadev Goswami says, verse 41. Sri Suka Uvaja. Having thus offered his prayers, Brahma circumambulated his worshipable Lord 3 times, bowed down at his feet, and returned to his own residence. So he makes clear what happened after. No? End of the stuti, parikram, namaste, Gaur Haribol, returning to his abode. So there are some interesting things to mention here. To begin with, that it is said that that Brahma circumambulated Krishna 3 times. Well, generally when you circumambulate like a venerable person, that's done 4 times. Yeah, technically speaking. Yeah. So why 3, not 4? Brahma knows all the things. I mean, he's Vidhi, as we know. He's very paka, very expert in knowing what to do, how to do the rules, the how do you say, the decorum, how to do everything. But at this point, Brahma was experiencing another Bimohan, if you will, as we know. First, the original Bimohan, in between the Bimohan of the love of the Brajavas, and now the Bimohan of Krishna is not saying anything, what's going on, what to do. So he's a little bit like, again, another shade of astonishment due to Krishna's silence and etc. So he doesn't know what's going on and what will come next. No. So somehow he felt in a hurry, better to leave now. No, I don't want to, again, to disturb, to create any better. No. So in that sense, we could say he could not properly count how many times he was doing this parikram, this circumambulation. So that's the general explanation why 3 and not 4. Another Vimohan. And then after that, as it's mentioned, he bows down to Krishna and left. So in connection to Brahma's leaving, some interesting point that came from the commentaries that I didn't know before. So if not, I would have shared that before, because it's related to a topic that was asked about a few times. So Brahma is returning to Satyalok, another way of saying Brahmalok, to his planet. And it is said that he returned, the commentators say, mostly Jiva Goswami as well as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Brahma's return to Satyalok was intended by Krishna, who was holding silence, because otherwise, in abandoning his position, Brahma, the work related to the creation of the world will be discontinued. Thus, it's made clear that the fulfillment of what Brahma cherishes will take place at the end of his tenure by the logic of Vedanta Sutra 3.3.33, which says, the condition of those appointed to a position of universal administration lasts for as long as the administration needs to take place. Because sometimes this question came and we entertained different possibilities. Of course, even in that case, there may be some ideas, as we will see in our last class when we go to, for example, what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying in his Navadvip Dhan Mahatmya, what happened with Brahma right after the Brahma-stuti. He will say that Brahma went to Navadvip. So he made some stop in Navadvip before going to Brahmalok, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he prayed to Mahaprabhu, and Mahaprabhu appeared to him at that moment and showed to him, you will be Haridas Thakur and you will be born as an outcast and you will attain me. So he already gave the Haridas Thakur Swarup at that moment, if you will, to Brahma. And then one could there are two options. One could say, okay, then he returned to Brahmalok, practiced Raga Bhakti in Brahmalok. And one could say after completing his tenure, he took birth in Gaur Lila in some universe, whatever Gaur Lila was happening in some universe when Brahma's life ended, as Haridas Thakur, and then attained Golok. Our Brahma of this universe has 51 years at this point. So he still has 49 years to go. Of course, for us it's long, but again, from his perspective, it's 49 years. I mean, if I tell him 49 years, you will attain everything. I mean, you have to celebrate minimum. So that's not too much. For us, it's too much from Brahma's time, but Brahma's subjective perspective is not that much. Or another option will be, considering what is being said here, that after being blessed by Mahaprabhu, Brahma, when he went to Navadvip, he received the blessing of Mahaprabhu right after Brahma-stuti. And when Mahaprabhu manifested his Leela on earth 500 years ago, that means 4,500 years after approx the Brahma-stuti, Brahma took birth in that Gaur Leela as Haridas Thakur and perfected his Swarup that Mahaprabhu already had revealed to him. But after that, we could say, but after that he returned to Brahmalok again and finished his tenure there. And in that case, we could say the time on earth from the Satyalok perspective would have been a short period of time, basically. I mean, since Brahma-stuti to be born as Gaur Leela is 4,500 years, for Brahma is a few days, basically. That's another option. Or we could say, if we want to continue contemplating the other options we already mentioned the other day, some of those, that maybe Brahma obtained full perfection and somehow someone else, Krishna in this case, picked up the post because someone had to be there, but Brahma was already too qualified to remain being Brahma. I mean, whatever the case, this is not the main point. Whatever the case, the prayers of Brahma, the point made here is he obtained what he wanted. He obtained he attained his ultimate desired goal, and he became Haridas in between some way or another. Whether in the mid the Gaur Leela or after his tenure, he was born as Gaur Leela. The important thing is the prayers had the desired effect, and don't get lost in details. I will say, as Kumraj was explaining yesterday. So there's a point to stop the research, if you will, and be satisfied. Okay, Brahma, because there can be some nuanced difference in that connection. You have something to share?
As just to play on words, Satyalok became Satyalok.
That's an interesting one. And use some scars over there in Brahmalok. Yeah. So anyhow, some words regarding this 41st verse in relation to Brahma's circumambulating, bowing down, and returning to his abode, and what happened in between that. So let's go to the next verse, verse 42. As you can see, I'm going faster than usual. After granting his son Brahma permission to leave, Bhagavan took the calves, who were still where they had been a year earlier, and brought them to the river bank, where he had been taking his meal and where his cowherd friends remained just as before. So now we return to the pre-Brahma-stuti dynamics, no? Picnic and all that happened before Brahma tried to kidnap and so on. So interesting, as we know, in the previous verse, Brahma, or a few verses before, Brahma asked permission to leave. He was in a hurry to leave, but somehow he didn't just run and say goodbye and leaving. No? So Sukadeva Goswami here is making clear that Krishna granted Brahma permission to leave. So somehow, although Brahma was in a hurry to leave, just in case what will come next, too many Vimohans here, he did not left out of his will, if you will, but somehow Krishna gave permission some way or another. No? And his offenses actually were forgiven. No? Remember, Brahma was here to beg forgiveness for his offense. So how do we know that Brahma's offenses were forgiven? Jiva Goswami comments, here's the expression in this verse. In the Sanskrit, Swabhuvam, which means referring to Brahma, his own son, Krishna's own son, Brahma. So when Sukadeva Goswami is saying here, Krishna granted permission to his own son to leave, the expression his own son implies forgiving of the offenses, just as a father will forgive his son. It's again, like Brahma asked it many times, like if mother has the baby in the womb and baby's kicking, mother won't take that offense. Will say, oh, how nice, the baby's alive. We are relating to each other. So Krishna is Brahma's mother, Brahma's father, Brahma's guru, Brahma's everything. So Krishna gave permission to leave, not necessarily saying anything, but sometimes they say that silence is a sign of consent. Like, okay. In this case, that the application. Also, Jiva Goswami say that with Krishna had like slight smile when Brahma was leaving. It's not that Krishna was serious and looking at him with frown eyebrows. And Jiva Goswami say that somehow with his smile, Krishna was telling a few things also. Not only I grant you permission to leave, but he was also asking him, are you going too soon? No. Again, you want to say you want to stay, and you seem like in a hurry. Are you going too soon? And the second question Jiva Goswami presents through the Krishna's slight smile is, should I bring the calves and gopas now? No, is this a moment for this or not? Brahma is like, oh my God.
So the slight smile was in the verse.
Sorry?
The fact that Krishna was slightly
Oh,
smiling.
that's commented by Jiva Goswami.
So he's just assuming that Krishna was slightly smiling.
Not assuming. He's there.
He's there, all right.
He's a member of the Leela. They know what's going on.
Yeah.
No need to assumptions, to engage in assumptions in this case. And Jiva Goswami concludes all this smile and questions through the smile, and the forgiving of Brahma, all this in combination indicates Krishna's humility, mercy, forgiveness, teaching, joking, and scolding with the hint of his omniscience. No, all at the same time. That's Krishna, Kalaniti, an ocean of arts who can accomplish so many things at the same time. So just with some slight smile, all the things in humility, mercy, forgiveness, teaching, joking, scolding. It's possible. And a hint of omniscience. Because Brahma is on that level yet. No, he's aware of Krishna's omniscience. So he's allowing that to happen. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says something interesting. Again, sometimes I will mention the commentators. He said that Krishna, who had kept quiet from the beginning of the praise, remember, Krishna was like, did not give up his silence in order to continue his dramatic act. So he starts to portray Krishna as a dramatic actor performing for Brahma. So he did not give up the silence because he's performing a particular character to continue his dramatic act, for the purpose of bewildering Brahma. as if that he was not enough bewildered yet. Acting like a little boy coming from a lineage of cowherders. So we will see that this acting was only in relation to Brahma and not in connection to the Brajavasis, in the sense of with the Brajavasis, he's not acting. No? He's who he is. But in relation to Brahma, he's acting to create some particular result, of course, and bless him in a particular way. So Vishwanath Chakravarti is depicting him as an actor on a stage performing in particular. So he has to continue the performance till it fulfills its purpose. She kind of at the end like, okay, Abraham, no problem, I love you so much. So it has to create the proper tension and an emotional zenith or whatever. So, so Krishna brought the lost calves, according to this verse, back to the picnic place, no? Or if you want to call it, to the prakash, to that dimension in which the boys were all together waiting for Krishna to bring the calves back. Remember the whole story, the calves were to graze, and Krishna said to the boys, I'm bringing them. And that's when Brahma appeared into the picture. So now resuming the whole thing, Krishna's bringing the calves back where the boys are there. And the friends are waiting, and look at him, Krishna coming with the calves, no? And Krishna was coming with yogurt, a morsel of food in his hand. As previously, did he say that Sanatana Goswami say, but of course, as we'll see, for the subjective perspective of the boys, it's just a second. But a year passed. So Sanatana Goswami say there was slight increase in the bodies of the boys because of 1 year had passed. I mean, they were not aware of that, but a little bit, because they are boys at that age. In 1 year, you can measure them, and it's like, so he mentions that detail there. And Krishna came, and the boys were like before, and you should understand that Krishna was like before. Nobody thought a year passed. Oh, Krishna, you look bigger or anything like that, no? So he had the same morsel of food in hand for 1 year. No? Interesting how to maintain food stuff there, no? So to say that he was seen by the boys, and as if nothing had happened, no? From the perspective of the boys, it's like there was nothing in between, if you will, no? All this Brahma Vimohan Leela and prayers and so on. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Jiva Goswami mentions all this harmonization or this putting of things together is only possible by the sublime power of Yoga Maya. And there's no other way to orchestrate and put all these places the pieces in its place. And also it is mentioned that the mothers, remember the mothers who wanted Krishna to be their child and the cows. He refers to the mothers. So the mothers, for them, a whole year had passed with Krishna being their kid. And the mothers remember all these things that happened during that year. Of course, not thinking it was Krishna, but they had memories of what happened in the past year. But of course, the recollection of those deeds were not present in the boys who were in the prakash, waiting in the picnic. You follow? So the mothers won't tell the kids when they return, oh, remember what you did 2 weeks ago? And they're like, it was not. That won't happen. Yoga Maya will take care of that, so no problem. But you follow the explanation, right? So again, let's one more word regarding Vishwanath Chakravarti, going back to this idea of Krishna being silent since Brahma began his praise. So the silence of Krishna is implied the following: he himself asking to himself in his performance. Remember, he's performing this dramatic act. So his silence implies Krishna asking to himself, where does this four-faced guy come from? What is he trying to do? And why does he keep talking all the time? That's Krishna like Mukdata, like an innocent boy. I'm eagerly preoccupied with finding my calves. I'm the little boy of a cowherd. I don't understand. So that was Krishna's performance, exclusive performance for Brahma. And Vishwanath Chakravarti concludes saying, being silent now at the end was the end of his dramatic act. Hence, the ignorance of his great Aishwarya was dramatically acted by Krishna in front of Brahma. And that was said with the word Natyam. Natyam means the act, or like theatrical performance that came in about on 1361, which is kind of in connection with the Agasur Lila in all this context. Also. And the Brahma Vimohan Lila specifically, actually. At the end of the chapter of the Brahma Vimohan Lila, the word Natyam is mentioned, like implying Krishna will act from now on, and then comes the praise of Brahma. So on one side he says that, but then he says, however, Krishna being overwhelmed by the Mahaprem of Yashoda, or the great love of Yashoda and other Brajavasim, Vatsalya, Bhav, and other rasas, Krishna sees that his own knowledge and power of opulence is his Aishvarya side, is covered by their love. So this ignorance, the ignorance that Krishna exhibits in connection to the Brajavasis, he's saying it's not a pretense. He's not performing an act with them. What we mentioned before, it's real. And for us, that's reality. ultimate reality is divine ignorance. Therefore, it is said that this one, how Krishna behaves with the Brajavasis, is never described as natyam, as in play acting. That was only used for Brahma. Krishna performing to churn the heart of Brahma and extract some particular result. As Kumara say, churning the ocean of Siddhanta and extracting the cream of Sakya Prem. So that was the purpose of the performance, if you will. But it's important to always separate. When Krishna is behaving with the Brajavas in one way or another, he's not making a show. He's totally overwhelmed by the strength of their love. So let's continue, verse 43. So Sukadev Goswami continues speaking to Parikshit Maharaj. O king, although an entire year had elapsed without their pranesh means prana isha, the isha of their pran, the lord of their life or life air. And without him, there's no more life flowing. So although an entire year had elapsed without their pranesh, the little boys covered by Krishna's Maya consider that year merely as half a moment. So, of course, before this verse could be a reply to a possible question. If before this verse one hears, okay, the boys were actually in that prakash or in that particular dimension for a year, although for them subjectively it's passing a moment, but it was technically a year. So how they could tolerate hunger, thirst, but especially separation from Krishna for a year. When we know that in separation from the beloved, even one moment seems like a year. So what do you mean 1 year separation? How does it perceive subjectively? So how they dealt with all that? And of course, this verse replies, they were struck by Yoga Maya. So they thought, what was the effect of that struck of Yoga Maya? The whole year was just half a moment, not even a moment. It was like, so in their perception, there was no change of time, hour, season. It's always the same time. Yeah, exactly. And by perceiving this, Sukadeva Goswami is narrating and visualizing all this. He used the word Rajan in this verse, which comes many times in the Bhagavatam. Rajan means, oh king. So generally every time the word Rajan comes in the Bhagavatam, the commentator will say, oh, this moment Sukadeva is experiencing chamatkar or astonishment. When he says, oh king, because already he's speaking to the king. He doesn't need to address king. But when he says, oh king, it's said on account of Sukadeva Goswami being completely amazed due to this fact. Although a year had elapsed, they just perceived that as half a moment by the influence of Yogamaya. Oh Kishore, oh king. So now after this, Sukadeva Goswami to further illustrate the power of Yogamaya, how actually this is very easy task, if you will, for such a potency. Sukadeva Goswami will in the next verse invoke a material example of Mahamaya to create to contrast one effect and the other, and to show if all the things happen under the influence of Mahamaya, how this won't happen under the influence of Yogamaya. So now comes verse 44. Sukadeva Goswami says, What indeed is not forgotten by those whose minds are bewildered by the Lord's illusory potency. Now we go to Mahamaya, gunas here. By that power of Maya, this entire universe remains in perpetual bewilderment, and in this atmosphere of forgetfulness, no one can understand his own identity. Well, that's pretty powerful. To have a whole universe in your grasp, not knowing who they are. I mean, totally sure they know. So the idea is he's giving here an example of forgetfulness under the influence of Maya Shakti. No? Which again, Maya Shakti is in one sense categorically different from Yoga Maya. I mean, the two of them are known as Maya, and we could, if you want, speak to them as two expressions of that Mahamaya, Yoga Maya. But the point is that they operate in very separate departments, Maya Shakti, Swarup Shakti. So although one thing is the Mahamaya of this world, another thing is the Yoga Maya of Brahma Vimohan Lila, again, the example or the contrast tries to shed light on this important point. Now, if what is described in this verse is possible for Mahamaya to have a whole universe forgetful of their identity, how Yoga Maya could not create her own divine illusion for 1 year for certain groups of so trying to further pound the post in that direction. Verse 45, so we don't lose the pace of the narrative. So Krishna returns with the calves, and the boys are looking at him like a moment passed. So the cowboys say to Krishna, "You came back nicely with great speed. We have not eaten even a morsel yet. Come here, let's eat in a good way." So that's how the Sakas are welcoming Krishna back. So they say, "Oh, you came back very quickly." No, so that when seeing Krishna, that's the implication. The Gopa thought, "Oh, we thought that it will take you at least 1 hour to bring all those calves back, but you came back in a flash. Wow!" And they're like, "Oh, Krishna is incredible. He did it so quickly. Took him a year, but they don't know." No? So, and in this connection, of course, Krishna is bringing quick arrival implies the bringing back of the lost calves, lost. No? So everything is in place for the picnic to be resumed, basically. No? Or another version where the boys say to Krishna, "We have not yet even eaten one morsel ourselves." Still, we're like, can be applied to Krishna. No, you have not eaten yet even one morsel. In other words, the same morsel is there in your hand. No? The boys remember, oh, that morsel you had when you went to look for the calf, still the morsel is there with you. You have the original morsel there in your hand. Although 1 year had passed. No, but Krishna didn't take anything because, of course, they always say Krishna is not hungry. In this case, without his friends. No, I mean he's not hungry with the bhakti of his friend. Only bhakti. That's Krishna's diet. No, only bhakti. So his friends are not there. He won't just like eat by himself. So that's implication also. The morsels kept there waiting. So now comes the moment for. So the Gopas see Krishna say, "Come here," and the implication of "come here" implies, according to the commentator. Remember, the boys were sitting like in a circle. So they enter in this place within our circle, sit in the midst. Sakya Mandal. Now there comes the idea of Sakya Mandal or Guru Maharaj, like the circle of friends. So eating, and it says you should eat in a good way. Like implication is you should eat properly, which means completely filling your belly. Not just a morsel. Now let's do things seriously. Akanta. Up to the neck. Now comes the Akantotsava, the great festival up to the neck. We have to do something like that. Akantotsav, up to the neck fest. That's implication. And the calves are back. There's no need to look for the calves anymore because that was like the main preoccupation a few minutes, according to them, ago. But now they are there. Now let's do what we are supposed to do. Resuming the picnic. Verse 46. Then Hrishikesh, Sukadev Goswami says, referring to Krishna, had a picnic with the boys while laughing. While they were returning from the forest after the picnic to their homes in Braj, he showed his friends the skin of the dead serpent, Agasur. Remember, they knew about the serpent, of course, no? That happened. They were there, they entered there. Yeah, for them, but not actually a few, what do you say?
Minutes.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a year, no? But still, as we will see, the serpent was there. So Krishna is named here Hrishikesh, which sometimes means the master of the senses. And the name is also invoked in connection to Krishna's own senses, because again, as we say, Krishna had no appetite. We could say without his friend, he had no appetite. And also we could say that he ate for his friend's satisfaction. No, in one sense, he doesn't need to eat. He's God in that level, but his friends want him to eat, so he does it. So his friends are happy. He wants to please his friends. Or Yashoda wants him, as we say, Yashoda always sees Krishna undernourished. So Krishna eats for pleasing her mother in this case. But it is said that although some commentators say in the beginning Krishna had no appetite, he was still maybe digesting Brahma's prayers. But after a while, with his friends and all the Sakya dynamics and so on, he ate with great appetite by giving an impulse to his senses. So in that connection, Hrishikesh counts the name, no? Also in connection to his own senses, due to the taste and the aroma and the texture of the food as well. Because again, the food is also part of bhakti, no? Because that was prepared by Jashoda and all. I mean, everything in the lila is bhakti. It's made of bhakti. And also again, he's doing that in the context of pleasing the senses of his friends. So he lives in the senses of the Brajavasis. It's important to understand that Krishna is living in each one of the senses of the Brajavasis. He's totally established in each of them. In the material world, there are different devas presiding over the senses of the human being, but Krishna is presiding over the sense of every senses of every Brajavasi, because Krishna is a servant of the senses of the Brajavasis, of his devotees. We are supposed, bhakti is supposed to be Hrishikena Hrishike Sivanam Bhakti Ruchate. We have to engage our senses for the pleasure of the master of our senses. That's the way of defining sadhana bhakti. And when you do that perfectly, you are dedicating your senses for his pleasure. He was dedicating his senses for the pleasure of your senses. So that means he's inhabiting each one of your senses, especially in the case of the Brajavasis. As Guru Maharaj likes to say, no, like Krishna is eating through the mouths of his friends, no, like a way to put that, no, like they are extensions of. I mean, they don't have a separate sense of enjoyment, no, like I'm the center. So it's like an extension of God in that sense. No? So they live only for his will. Whatever they do is pleasurable for him, even if they have different tastes and so on. All that is aligned with his taste. No? Their different tastes are part of his taste. Because he's Rasa Raj also. No? He's the king of taste. He tastes everything in all possible varieties. So that takes so many forms in this sense.
I've heard new devotees say, "Oh, Krishna is enjoying through my senses or the senses of the humans on earth or whatever." But that's a real misconception.
Yeah, that's not that. I mean, that's important to be familiar what makes Krishna enjoy, no? And the more you are aligned with what gives Krishna really enjoyment, you can speak about he may be present there, but if not, it's just like a way of, I mean, I'm doing any nonsense and Krishna has to be enjoying through my nonsense sense enjoyment. It doesn't make sense. And of course, you can use all those things to abuse, justify who knows what, no? So even if you are doing things properly and nicely and humbly, you won't dare to say, Krishna enjoying for my senses. No. Poor Krishna. Anyhow, so in this connection, 1 year had elapsed. Remember, they are here in the picnic. They had the picnic, eating the things. Remember, all the things, the vegetables, the rice, all the edibles were there for a year, in one sense. But everything was like as if just I mean, how is the food after 5 seconds? There's not too much change. It's not like it starts to smell bad, anything. So this was 1 year, but Yogamaya made the arrangement and everything was preserved. Like if everything was, so the food did not generate vivatsa, rasa, this experience of, I would say, disgust, like, no. So everything was like, So Krishna is described laughing in this verse. Why Krishna was laughing? Of course, he was with his friends in a picnic and so on, but also to say that by the commentators, Krishna was laughing because of hearing the words of his friends, which were totally innocent due to Yogamaya. No? Second naivete, remember, in Braj. Everyone is naive, but in the highest way, having integrated so many layers of complexity. And also because of not hearing any type of statement of sorrow of any kind from them. No? Like there was no difficulty. Everything was perfectly arranged by Yogamaya. They are not aware of all this stuff that happened. So Krishna was like laughing and happy and enjoying the naivete there. No? And again, the verse concludes saying that Krishna showed when they were returning from the picnic setting back to Braj, he pointed to the boys, Agasur, the great serpent, the big serpent there. So he did that to create a memory in the boys. For the boys, it happened after a moment, just in case they forgot, because I mean the picnic was pretty exciting, and you may get lost and found there. So he pointed to Agasur, to the boys, like something that happened recently, although it was 1 year ago. So they could narrate the killing of Agasura by Krishna when they returned to Vrindavan. Krishna kind of reminded them, look, Agasura, the voice. And they start to compose songs on the way back to Braj. And when they enter Braj, they will start to tell everyone in Braj how Krishna killed Agasura and so on. And the commentators say that the skin of Agasur, which was there for a year, was somehow safeguarded by Yogamaya. So it didn't decompose also. It was still there. Because if the boys, of course, will see that decompose, but it was a minute ago. So no. It's like just recently killed snake. So they went back to Braj. So now next verse will describe the entrance to Braj, from the forest back to Braj after the first picnic, after the killing of Agasur, and after a few other things that almost nobody knows. So verse 47 says like this. Krishna's transcendental body was decorated with peacock feathers and flowers and painted with forest minerals, and his bamboo flute loudly and festively resounded, entering. As he called out to his calves by name, his cowherd friends purified the whole world by chanting his glories. Thus, Krishna entered the cow pasture of Nanda, and the sight of his beauty at once produced a great festival for the eyes of all the cowherd women. So that's the Mantramaya Upasana, like the still picture to meditate on of Krishna's returning to Braj after his forest experience of that particular day. So here they say that the sight of Krishna's beauty produced a festival for the eyes of the gopis. Here gopis mostly refer to Yashoda, elderly gopis, Vatsalya camp, because at this moment Krishna is not yet performing his Kishore Lila, although some commentators say, well, but Radha can be included also somehow, although overtly they are not interacting romantically. I mean, Radha is there in the Lila as a girl, and it's still a festival to see Krishna in whatever age and situation you're in. And
So is Balaram still home covered by Yogamaya because it was his birthday, like his monthly birthday celebration?
No,
but with Krishna.
Yeah. Balaram at one point knew. Remember that we mentioned already that during the year, that the Krishna had expanded in the form of the calves and the boys. At the end of that year, Balaram, what's going on here? Like the cows have new calves, but they're ecstatically running to the elder calves and showing a special affection, neglecting the just newborn calves. Mothers are showing more affection to these boys than to Krishna, or equal of it? What's going? So at that point, it's say that Yogamaya kind of retires the veil, and he can understand that. So that was at the end of.
But where is he now? Have you been
He's
to
not described. He's not mentioned here, but he was not in the. No, he was not in the picnic, because originally he was not there because of his monthly birthday. So he will receive the. Although it's not officially mentioned, that's implied, because that will create some like this disturbance, no? Because for the boys, like, what are you doing here, Balaram? We were not his. So everything has to continue flowing smoothly. So everyone has to be in their place. So anyhow, Krishna's entrance is described as producing a festival due to his beauty in the eyes of the gopis. So that's an interesting. Many times that's expressed in Shastra. That in Jagannath Puri they have this called Netrotsav, literally. Netrotsav means festival for the eyes. This is when Jagannath, before Rath Yatra, when Jagannath becomes sick for a few weeks and he cannot give darshan, so nobody sees him. And when he goes back and gives darshan right before Rath Yatra, that's called Netrotsav. Netra means eyes, and Utsav means festival. So to say that Krishna's beauty produced a festival in the eyes of others. Why? Because Krishna's beauty is in itself a festival. His beauty is a festival. So it creates festivals wherever he goes, whoever sees that. That's basically the implication. He's so beautiful. I mean, his beauty embodied, personified, and the highest form of beauty, as Guru Maharaj will say, form of beauty. Beauty can have a form, an ultimate form. We know which one that is. No? So he's a whole walking festival in itself, basically. You don't need to organize a separate festival just to have him, and that's why the main part of our festival, we organize Utsav, Mahotsav always. And the main part of a Mahotsav, Vaishnav Mahotsav, is Harikatha. Why? Because Harikatha has to do with describing the beauty of Krishna, which is a festival in itself. You follow my point? So that's a festival, to describe that festival, to describe that beauty. That's how it's described in the Bhagavatam. The end, it says, Tadiva Ramyam Ruchiram Navam Navam Tadiva Sashwan Manaso Mahotsavam, and so on. So describing Harikatha, one of the many nice verses of the Bhagavatam glorifying Harikatha. This is another category altogether. We have Harikatha about different Lila Katha, Rupa Katha, Nam Katha, but also we have Harikatha about Harikatha. And Harikatha is called Tadiva Ramyam Ruchiram Navam Navam. So this Harikatha is Ramyam, it produces Ram, produces pleasure. Ruchiram produces Ruchi, taste. Navam Navam, it's always new and new. It's always fresh. Why? Because again, it's connected with he who all the things are going on in an ongoing upgraded version. And Tadeva Sashwam Manaso Mahotsavam. And this Harikatha is eternal and is a festival for the mind. Manasa Mahotsavam. So that's again the point. Because Krishna is a festival unto himself. So whoever opens his mouth to say something about that festival creates the festival. So we don't need too much for organizing a festival. No? We don't need balloons and color lights and fire something. We just need to invoke Harikatha, and that's the festival. Maybe we may have some things in between. There's Kirtan, it's festival Prasad, but the main point is let's speak about Krishna's beauty. So anyhow, so here Krishna and his friends are described using forest decoration, because they always have forest decoration, but also it is implied that sometimes with the kids and the boys and Krishna, they're decorated in the morning before going to the forest by their parents. The parents also will decorate them with things with gold and things a little bit more Aishvarik, if you want to put it like that. And when they go to the forest, they will and start to decorate themselves with forest fruits and flowers, and they will return with that type of ornamentation. So that's what implied here. Now they came back to their houses specially decorated with that particular setting. And the boys are described here as singing the glories of Krishna, which implies again they are performing Lila Kirtan. Remember, Krishna just a few minutes pointed at them, Agasur. No? So now they are coming and spontaneously composing Lila Kirtan about Krishna's killing of Agasur. So they are singing and creating song and poetry in the moment at the spot about how Krishna killed Agasur while entering, as if just happened. No, just some minutes ago he did that. No. And again, and nobody will know anything because everyone in Braj, I mean, everyone else in Braj were not in a separate prakash. They were continue their life, but nobody knew about killing in Agasur or anything. So for them, it's like, okay, it happened. Although they will say, well, they are boys' stories, but even if they were to believe the story, they have no way of proving actually this took place a year. You follow my point? So for them, it's like, oh, well, Balaram knew. But he will, like, as his usual sometimes to serve Krishna, he will look into another direction. Like when he goes in the midday with his friends, and okay, he knows when to do sidelong glances in some other place. And also in this verse, it described that Krishna was especially joyful, happy by returning here, because it is said that at this point was more joyful than before, because the real boys that he was with now, in one sense, the point that made by the commentators, were superior to the forms that he had created. That's an interesting point. Although, of course, the expansions that Krishna created are beautiful and they tell a lot. They tell how much he knows his friends and his form and his heart. He can reproduce that without nobody noticing. Nonetheless, it's him. They're not his friends. So he will prefer always to be with his friends. So that's creating in him some special. And that also shows, how to say, that the friendship with the friend, because during that year that he was expanded, he had friendship with those expansions, because he had to interact with his friends and calves as if they were friends, although he was with himself. So he had friendship with them, but it was not the same taste that he will experience by interacting with his friends. No? So it's another way of making this classical Gaudiya point that Krishna is deriving more pleasure from interacting with his Swarup Shakti than from his own inherent bliss, when that bliss is not taking a shape in the form of his devotees. Now, Jiva Goswami will speak in the Priti Sandarbha about this in terms of Swarupananda and Swarup Shakti Ananda. It says Krishna has some bliss in his own internal self, but when that bliss takes a shape in the form of one associate and he can interact and have a loving exchange, that gives him way high more pleasure. And there are many verses in Shastra when he's saying that Nahamat Manamasa Sadhubir Matkair Sadhubir Vina Shriyan Chatyantiki Brahma Samgatira Hampara. Like he's saying, oh, I don't have so much pleasure when I derive not so much pleasure from my own internal bliss than the one I derive when serving my devotees. Gurmash Jiva Goswami gives this example of the flute. You can whistle, that's one thing, but if that same thing passes through the bamboo flute, it creates another sound. It's the same air coming from you. So the same idea. Swarupananda is Krishna's air, but when that air passes through his devotee, oh, that creates a very charming experience. That's an important philosophical point that extols the ultimacy and the glories of Bhakti and Swarup Shakti in providing Ananda to Hari. So he was especially happy because of that. Now I have my friends. Now I can experience these high tastes. The other ones, yeah, were nice, were an expansion of mine, but it's not the same. So Krishna's entering with his friends, and everyone is singing about his glories, what he did. So the boys, verse 48. Now comes a verse where it's a little bit more specify what the boys were saying when entering Braj with Krishna. So verse 48. The boys sang in the cowherd village. Today a big serpent was killed by him, the son of Yashoda and Nanda, and we were saved from it. So we're kind of like announcing in the four directions. That was a big news. I mean, the picnic was great, but I mean, killing of Agasur was pretty much special, like big serpent. And the boys say, what? Today. That's the first thing they say. Today, Krishna killed this, because that was there a few minutes ago, some hours maybe ago. A picnic took some time. So everyone was okay today. Balan was like, Mm. So again, they say today they were not aware whole year had passed. And again, the same for the Brajavasi. They did not have no clue that the whole year had passed and Bhagasura was killed a year before. And remember, all this started, the narrative of this Leela when Sukadev told to Parikshit, after a whole year, this happened. And Parikshit, but how something that happened 1 year before was everyone else knew a year after? Because that was all the Brajavasis knew about Krishna's killing Agasura 1 year after the killing. And then Sukadev continued, but he said, no, one stop, Gurudev, please. I mean, why 1 year in between? What happened? So then the whole narrative. So now we are back to that point where the Brajavasis are getting to know about that 1 year after 1 year without them knowing it was after 1 year. So some boys here are calling Krishna Jashodanandan, the son of Jashoda killed Agasura. Some other boys will say the son of Nanda killed Agasura. So the commentators say that the ones who say the son of Jashoda killed Agasura are the ones who were born in Jashoda's family lineage. Somehow they have that bias. They like to call Krishna more Jashodanandan than Nandanandan. And the ones say the son of Nanda killed Agasura were the ones born in Nanda Maharaj's lineage. So there is some bias in the Leela, no problem. Or it is some other commentators say they are actually praising the two of them, Jashoda and Nanda, on equal terms without making any type of distinction, to show the good fortune of everyone in Gokul for having such two personalities, Nanda and Jashoda, in the cowherd community. So at the end of the day, they are glorifying Krishna, Nanda, and Jashoda all at the same time. So let's go to the last verse from today, which is verse 49. So now Parikshit Maharaj will take the lead. He will ask a question, as usual, very important, as we always mention. It's 50-50. It's not only the one who is speaking, but the audience has a role to play. And many times, if Parikshit Maharaj wouldn't have made good questions, Srimad Bhagavatam will last for 200 verses or something. So the same with Krishna and Arjuna in the Gita. So the inquirer is a crucial contribution for as udipana, to create more stimulant, excitement to the speaker. So after Sukadeva Goswami mentioned these first 8 verses, like narrating what happened right after the Brahma-stuti, now will come a question by Parikshit Maharaj. So Kim Parikshit say, verse 49, O Brahmana, how could the cowherd woman have developed for Krishna, someone else's son, such unprecedented pure love, a love they never felt even for their own children? Please explain this. You understand the question? Parikshit is asking, referring to the mothers of Vrindavan, the Vatsalya gopis, who had Krishna for a year as their child. So how they had more love for Krishna than the one they had for their own children. Because Sukadev told that to him. He knows Parikshit knows what happens. But nonetheless, he's asking, not so much for himself, as we'll see, but for other people, how it's possible that someone may feel more love for Krishna than for their own child. That's not the classical example. So please unpack this. So that's a very nice question, as we'll see. It's a good example of a good philosophical question, because of course the question will foster, as we'll see, a great answer by Sukadeva Goswami, a great unfolding through which Sukadeva Goswami will further establish many of the main points on the Brahma-stuti, and one of them being Prem is the final goal of life, and not, for example, self-realization, like mukti, or realizing myself merely as Atma, but the Atma of the Atma, Atma with capital A, Krishna. It will all converge in that direction, but for him to reach there, Parikshit Maharaj is kindling that with the question. So that gives Sukadeva the opportunity to further explain and wrap up in a very interesting way the whole chapter. And again, the question is mostly in connection to the experience in this world. By nature, you will see that a parent will love more their children than they love the children of others. So Krishna, technically speaking, is not the son of all the other mothers of Vrindavan. So it kind of runs counterintuitive with one's general experience. So Parikshit is asking about that. I mean, if the elderly gopis are naturally loving Krishna more than their own children, what is the logical reason behind that? How to explain that situation? Of course, you may already know what's the reply, but Parikshit Maharaj is asking about that. So just in case if things can be properly, like for example, after the Rasa Lila, different of course Lila, but pretty Bimohan in its own way. Pretty many people may like not understand what take place. Parikshit Maharaj will ask, no, Sukadev Goswami, like, how is that Krishna was dancing? Krishna is known as the Prince of Dharma, a very epitome of religion. He was dancing with the wife of other men. So how to explain this? So that was his question after the whole Rasa Lila. Again, it's not that he was doubting, but just in case anyone is some lingering doubt is there, so it gives possibility to Sukadev to fully explain the tattva, the siddhanta in connection to the lila, because one thing is lila, another thing is siddhanta. Sometimes if you go straight to lila, you may be overwhelmed, like what's going on here? So you need some philosophy to understand what's actually taking place in a foundational level. So this is a similar case here. On many occasions, Parikshit will save the day by presenting some question, save our day. And so again, Parikshit is making this question because the love of the mothers of Vrindavan basically contradicts which normally happens to most of the people. Again, parents generally will love more their child more than any other's child. It's kind of natural in the experience of this world. Even if the child is inferior to other child, as Guraj will say, the child is blind and the mother will call him Padmalochan, the lotus-eyed baby. He has so beautiful eye. So this is called loka viruddha in Sanskrit. Loka viruddha means something with viruddha means which goes against loka. Loka means like public opinion or what is generally experienced in the world. So this seems to be a case of loka viruddha, something which goes against experience of most of the people, which will be, I love my child more than anyone else. Not, I kind of love others' child more than my child. So again, mostly we could say Parikshit is asking for the benefit of other people. And some of the commentators here, they kind of unfold the background of Parikshit's question. And Parikshit is thinking while presenting this question. He says, usually, so much affection, like the one that the mothers of Vrindavan exhibited for Krishna during that year, Krishna, they go through somebody was Krishna. Parikshit knows. So usually, so much affection occurs in one of three ways. That's in between reasoning behind the question. One, because of the beauty of the object. Two, because of a special possessiveness for the object. Three, because of a family relationship. But, Parikshit follows, in this case, one, first, in regard to the beauty of the object, say the first category does not apply in this case because when Krishna had the forms of those boys, he looked just like they did. So there was nothing different from the perspective of the mothers. It was their child. Exact replica. So there was no difference in beauty, if you will, which also, of course, speaks about the beauty of Krishna's friends. As Gurmas likes to say, they are as beautiful as he is. They serve kind of as mirrors to Krishna. So you cannot explain this point, reply to this question by resorting to that because they were the same beauty. In the second case, special possessiveness for the object, this second category does not apply either because there was no change in the mother-son relationship. So the dynamics of the relationship was the same. There was not some different special nuance that made it, special attachment. It was the same type of interaction. Krishna appears as their children, not as someone else. And third, which was in connection to a family relationship, he says, the third one occurred in Rukmini, Pradyumna's mother, when Pradyumna arrived. Pradyumna is the son of Krishna. But in Krishna's case, it's the opposite, in the sense that he's not the Gopi's actual son. No? So, like, okay, Rukmini felt something for Pradyumna because he was born and he was her child. But in this case, Krishna was not born from there and is not their child. So, with all this in mind, the point is, Parikshit inquires with the desire to understand the philosophical logic behind this, or to make others understand. And in this verse, there is a Sanskrit word is katyatam. Katyatam means it should be explained. Of course, with this is not that Parikshit is giving orders to his guru Sukadeva Goswami. This should be explained, but like it should be explained. No, like in the sense that how this took place, it's important to unpack that. No, so the point is Parikshit is not questioning how to say in English the propriety of it. No, like implying it was wrong how that such a thing could happen, but just it's important to explain how this happened. Or some of the commentators will say that the question of Parikshit has as its main target some ascetic sages which were seated on the assembly. Remember, it was not just Parikshit and Sukadeva, there was a whole assembly of personalities hearing, and not every one of them were bhaktas, what to speak, pure bhaktas. Some were jnanis and yogis and everyone. I mean, the emperor is dying and great news and everyone is going there. So some commentators say that the question, the intention behind the question is more connected to some ascetic sages which were in the assembly that Parikshit knew that all they were engaged in strong tapasya, still they loved their sons more than Krishna. And it is said that Parikshit Maharaj asked the question as if to deride them. Like these guys are dressing like this, doing that, but they're loving their children more than Krishna. My God, they didn't got the whole thing. But he's asking that for their benefit at the end. So it's deriding them, but also blessing them. So that's the question of Parikshit Maharaj. Very, very interesting, very deep, and will be beneficial for many, especially in the form of the reply of Sukadeva Goswami. So what did Sukadeva Goswami reply to the question? That we'll see in our next two classes. Because again, it's a reply that requires time. He will reply in 7 verses, some very interesting philosophical ones, and so we'll see the reply of Sukadeva in the next class tomorrow, and also part of the last class the day after tomorrow, and then the last part of the last class we will conclude by explaining a little bit, going back to Brahma's attaining his ultimate desire in the form of Sri Haridas Thakur. So I will conclude here. And tomorrow we meet again, in case someone is connected a little bit later. I mentioned that yes, tomorrow we were not supposed to have a lecture, but we will have tomorrow and the day after tomorrow at the same time. I don't know if there are any questions, comments, something you may like to share before we conclude today. Kishore?
Is this the first time Parikshit Maharaj has spoken since he asked if it's why it took a year?
Yeah. I mean, after that it was just all ears to hear such a reply. So now, again, the whole Leela was explained, established, Brahma Vimohan Leela, Brahma-stuti. So yeah, he's returning now to add further, shed further light through his question. Yeah. Something else? Okay. So we conclude here, and tomorrow, same time, same channel, we continue with Sukadeva Goswami's reply. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Sri Dauji Gopal ki jai, Anantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Sri Brahma-stuti ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanand, Hari Hari Bo. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Hari Bo.